think half of us up and half of us back, to give it a little bit. So if he's up, I'm back. We're gonna go half up and half back. So you and I are back, Chris. The mayor has to be up. You're up, I'm back. Our council is back.
Yeah. Hi, good morning. How are you?
Here's just updated copy, you're close to 8 this morning.
Yeah, we're about the same.
I'll give you a copy. What's the copy, gets a copy. Here's an updated copy from what I sent last night.
Thank you. May I?
Yes.
Thank you. Since I can't buy it anywhere, I might use it
I
here.
know.
My daughter had brought one small bottle like this from
Yeah,
New York.
and you
she
guys
said,
are all
"Well,
like one drop
one drop at a time."
or a day. Yeah, we. Do you want to?
I hate this. I don't like the texture of that.
Really?
Oh, I just hate
I
it.
love the smell on it.
Oh, I hate it.
Oh. Did you make your own then?
I just wash my hands.
Okay. So you make your own.
Till it's dry.
Lauren.
Good morning.
We are doing a
I like this
hand
one.
wipe here this morning.
But,
Oh, yeah. Jeez. Let me see if I can get water. Hey, Joe. Sit up on the. You can sit there and you're gonna send the dance? You're gonna sit up here?
Usually does.
Yeah.
His name plate is up there.
Yeah, we had talked, he was gonna sit out there. Here you go. That's fine. I-
Spread apart as
I
much
can't-
as we want to
This
be.
is,
We're trying to do half,
we had,
half back and half.
that's costing, so this is the final copy.
We have something to
Just,
say.
oh yeah, you're good, just don't roll over.
Move back to the extent you go back. In other words, every other person is forward, we're back.
Yeah, I'll just go
Okay,
back.
that's better social distance. Good, how are you at? Rhoda?
Talk to the state attorneys about why we can't get the information. And send it there to the communities, and they said it's illegal, the cases.
So did everybody see
So, we don't need the names.
Tecklenburg's actions last night?
Yes. I'm surprised that our resident Charlestonian is here. It doesn't go into effect until midnight tonight. Oh, okay.
We offered to break her out of Charleston if necessary.
I saw the stash too.
I also saw that Isle of Palms this morning was scheduling I think, two special call meeting for the same issues. Are we all on?
We're live, and I think we have some people. We have 77 people.
Good. And one of the things I will ask, I don't know whether you're, you know, when we have meetings with live audiences here, I mean, one of the pieces of feedback we're able to get quickly is whether the people can hear us, because I can see the, you know, quizzical faces if we're getting too far from the mics and whatever. So if we get talking to each other and we're all over the place and people can't hear us online, will you be getting any signal to that and let us know? What's that? So you'll be able to get it, yeah, because we'll try to pay extra attention to make sure we're sitting up and on our microphones. I know I watched the cities last night, and they were live streaming. They were actually at home doing it from, I guess, Skyping or whatever, and it was very different. Some of them you could hear very, very well. Others you were really stretching, yeah. All right. All right, well, I think I'm going to go ahead and bring this special call town council meeting to order. And we have everybody here today, plus we also have our town administrator, Stephanie Tillerson, and we have our town attorney, Joe Wilson. The approach that we're going to take for this, or at least that I propose, is that I'd like to start off making just some general comments to you all in terms of where I think we are with respect to dealing with this public health crisis. Some of the things that we've done and we've tried to focus on, and some of the concerns that are still out there, and maybe try to piece together where this action that we're proposing today fits into some of the other activities. Once I've done that, I am going to take a few minutes to try to make sure that I can explain and describe the proposal, especially in this proposed ordinance, the proposal around short-term rentals, as clearly as I can. Over the last 24 hours, we sought comments and received. Frankly, I was very pleased. We've received comments from a lot of our people. This morning I saw about 121 comments, probably about half of them related to this particular proposal itself. The other half are, I think, a number of other kinds of related issues, but using that opportunity appropriately to get in our hands, you know, other kinds of questions. So I think in a lot of those questions really stemmed back to needing to better understand the specifics of the proposal itself. So I think when I go into a little more depth about the rental proposal, what we're proposing, how it works, I think that will hopefully address maybe half of the questions that we got. At that point, what I am going to do is either I'll read or Stephanie will read or summarize the key provisions of the proposal itself, because in this proposed ordinance there are also, in addition to the rentals policy discussion, there are also a number of other sort of cleanup things. What we're adding into the ordinance are other actions or other actions that I've taken on my own authority that we now want to incorporate into this ordinance. At that point, assuming that I have a motion, or I will ask for a motion to approve the proposal. We have to do that as a matter of order. If we have a motion and a second, then we will of course open this up for general discussion, which is what we need to do. In order to do that discussion, what I am going to propose first, rather than us all sort of jumping into it, is to first take an opportunity to give each of you as council members an opportunity to initially have the floor, if you wish to take it, and make any comments, raise any questions, essentially sort of get on the record with any of your thoughts or concerns or questions about the proposal, so that we, while not in the form of a debate, everybody's had a chance to sort of get their sense on the record of this proposal. After that, I'll open it up then for general conversation, if there are back and forth questions or discussion. And once we have done that, and I'm comfortable that all of the questions have been addressed and everybody's ready, I will open it up for a roll call vote. Once we've done that, then there are, in these 121 questions, a number of other very important things that people have asked. And so what I would be willing to do, and I think want to do, is to stay here for a little while after we've had the vote, and I will try to summarize for as many people who want to continue to sit on the line and listen or watch. I'll try to go through I'm not going to go through every question, but there are some themes here. You know, what are we doing at Harris Teeter? How are we handling some other issues? What are we doing on the beach in terms of dealing with crowds? What does the governor's 3-person thing really mean? So after we've done this, my intent is to then just take some extra time, try to go through some of those questions. If people want to stay on, that's great. And then we will adjourn the meeting. Does that work for everybody?
Yes, Mayor.
Yes.
All right. Just a couple, I just want to put this in the context of the overall effort that we're dealing with. Clearly, this is a serious moment. I don't think that any of us, I certainly in the 10 to 12 years that I've spent either on town council or with the Keeker board or in any other part of Kiowa have ever imagined that we would be dealing with a situation with this that is so fluid, that has such an impact on our residents and the broader community, and that we would be in a position having to deal with these kinds of issues. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been asked a lot of times, well, are you sure that that is the right thing to do, whatever the decision is? Are we doing the right thing? And frankly, my view is I can't possibly know in this situation what the right thing is, and I'm not sure that anybody does. But I think what people need to understand is, at least I'm comfortable that this town council is doing everything that they can to make the best decision. I think we will only know in hindsight whether any of the decisions we make were the right decisions. But I think we're doing the very best that we can to make the right decision, or the best decision, I should say, based on the information that we have in front of us. And we have taken a great deal of time. We continually interface with and get feedback and advice from the major medical facilities in the state. And so I think all we can do is, as we move on, try to make the best decisions we can, hope that at the end of the day they turn out to have been the right ones. But we do it in a measured fashion, in a calm fashion. It would be very easy right now in this town to be like a pendulum and sort of vacillate from one extreme to the other, because I think public opinion and sort of the sense of the community jumps back and forth pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. I also think while we are trying to be very factual and we're trying to pay attention to things like what are the real facts, what are the number of rentals on the island, how many people do we have, what are the medical people telling us, we do have to at the same time pay great attention to what our residents and our property owners are telling us, because their concerns, their level of anxiety, their comfort that we are doing the best things to keep them safe are critical. As we have approached some of the decisions that we've made in the last few weeks, I think as a town council, we've never sat down and really codified this, but I think that our goals have been, so that the people listening to us understand sort of how are we approaching this. Our primary goal clearly is to protect lives. At the same time, it's to protect lives, but we're not trying to protect lifestyles. What we realize is that a lot of people are having to make a lot of sacrifices. We have hundreds of people now who in the last weeks are out of jobs. We've got businesses closed down. If any of the people watching today are out of state, they probably are not aware that even in the last day, Charleston yesterday passed some very significant changes that essentially resulted in what they call a stay-home provision, which is intended to, while there's still a fair amount of latitude about what you can do in that, they have ratcheted up based on their sense of their community and their risk. They have ratcheted up significantly the kinds of constraints that they have put on their residents and businesses. Folly Beach yesterday passed an ordinance which placed a complete moratorium on any new short-term rental activity out farther than we are proposing here to the end of April. So again, our primary goal is to protect the public health. Our secondary goal, and I think this is reflected in the message that I provided yesterday when I spoke to issues like contractors, is that we do have a goal of trying to protect the economy of the community in the long run. And that is important. In some of the comments that we've gotten here, we've been correctly and understandably challenged about what's the impact of some of the things we're doing on the economy. And clearly we're all concerned about that, not just from a Kiowa standpoint, but nationwide. I mean, we have the number of workers on Kiowa who are out of work, the number, and I actually have to maybe do a shout out or applaud some of our major employers on this island, because I will tell you that some institutions or some organizations like the resort, like Kiowa Partners and the club, some of the restaurants, they are right now doing everything they can to try to maintain some semblance of operation and keep their people employed, even if they have people doing things they normally are not doing. So I think there's a fantastic effort going on in the community to try to minimize the impact on workers. But as this thing goes on, that is going to get more and more difficult. So clearly we are concerned about the economy, and for some of those letters and emails I get of do you know what impact this is having on rental owners or on businesses, we absolutely do. That was one of the prime drivers for the position that we have articulated with respect to, for example, contractors. The last goal that I think is reflected in some of the things that we're doing is that we know that this is placing a burden on a lot of people, and we've been trying to share that burden as much as possible around the community. So we are not trying to pick out certain groups, certain entities, certain elements of our population, and somehow have them be impacted more than others. I think we have, when you look at where we are at today, probably 4 major concerns that I'm hearing from our residents right now. The first one is just simply the fact and the goal to get people to actually start practicing safe distancing. If I look at the phone calls I get, the emails I get, the concerns I get, that is still the #1 issue that I hear from everybody. Is in many cases I understand they're saying I'm doing it, but others aren't. But this concern that at this point we still don't have people practicing that throughout the community. That was a big part of the message that I provided yesterday. And I think, every day we see people getting more cognizant of that. We also, and I think this is something we're going to have to focus on after this meeting, maybe the next focus is to focus on those checkpoints where people have to come into contact with each other. And the fact is Harris Teeter is probably the most critical one, and the one that I get the most comments and emails about. People will tell me, fine, I can practice safe distancing, but I still have to go to the grocery store. I think Harris Teeter has made some great strides with their senior hours. They have asked, and we're trying to help them enforce having only one member of a family in the store at the same time. I'm getting questions about whether we can do things in the community like more grocery pickup and other options for people to be able to shop without feeling like they are violating the safe distancing. And I think those are some real challenges and some things that we're going to need to focus on. And finally, and I think what we're trying to address with this proposal, are the real concerns that we are hearing from people about the potential for others to be bringing this virus into our community, and the concern that with the number of people that we have, whether it be contractors, renters, families of our property owners who may be choosing to come here, and understandably as a place to try to ride out this, that we have more and more concerns about the number of people on the island and where they are coming from and the potential that they bring for bringing this virus into the community. So I think those are some of the things. That's sort of the context that I think has brought us to the point about talking about short-term rentals. We have informally among ourselves, and I think I've gotten feedback from all of you, that at this point we do not feel, despite the great desire to limit people on the island, that we do not feel that there is any basis upon which we should be or can be telling property owners, part-time property owners, that they should not be or should in some way be restricted from using their properties. We have also, I think, all concluded individually that those same property owners, as long as they are again using proper responsibility, should not be restricted from having their immediate family members, their children, their grandchildren here, as long as those people are operating within the guidelines that we've provided around safe distancing. The one issue that is still out there that I get many concerns about are the tourism population, and the desire and concern to see that constrained. The proposal that we have in front of us today is to put in place a moratorium on the booking of new rentals that would result in a first day of arrival between the dates of today and April 15th. So essentially a 21-day moratorium. I think most of the questions that we got from people were around the question of how does this work? Does this, who's included in this, who isn't? If I already have a rental on the book, what does that mean? So let me address the 3 or 4, I think, key questions on how this will work. First of all, it is just that. It is a very simple, very measured, straightforward moratorium on any rental property. Now, a rental property is essentially any property in this island that has a business license from the town to operate as a short-term rental, which by definition means renting for 28 days or less. The moratorium says that if you currently have on the books a rental confirmation that would result in somebody coming to the island and commencing their rental between now and the 15th, we are not asking that those rental bookings be canceled. So what we are doing is, under this proposal, allowing existing bookings to continue to be honored. So if a rental owner is looking at their property and they've got somebody, a family coming next Sunday, this proposal is not requiring that they contact and cancel that booking. Now I think there's been a lot of discussion about that, and the concern for taking that position, or the driver for taking that position, I think is twofold. One, all of the data that we have, and we have collected anecdotally and some actual statistics from a number of the primary rental managers, the number of actual renters on the island, and I use that concept of paying renters, people who are actually, they're not a family, they're not the owner of the renter, they're not a guest of the owner, they're not the property owner, but they went on a website and they checked the boxes and said, I'm coming to Key West as a renter. The number of those people is very, very low, probably only slightly over 10% of our actual 1,350 rental properties. The information we also have from our rental managers is that those numbers are declining, not going up. So we certainly have the ability, could have the ability to construct this proposal in a way that would require canceling existing bookings and not allowing those people over the next 3 weeks to honor the bookings. The reason that I'm not proposing that as part of this is twofold. One, the number is low, therefore the incremental impact on the community of those few number of people being here is not large. And by canceling those bookings, we put, I think, both the affected families who had the bookings and our property managers and our property owners, we raise a significant level of complexity to them in terms of what they have to deal with in terms of canceling rentals, dealing with rental policy cancellations, who gets their money back, who doesn't, and I think for the small number of rentals, we're trying to avoid that. What this also will allow is that renter owners or property managers can still be out with their websites booking reservations that commence after April 15th. So if they want to be trying to be out there filling up bookings for May or June or whatever, there is nothing here that prevents them from doing that. So we are not shutting down existing rentals. What we are trying to do is to put a lid or a cap, because there is so much concern in the community about the specific numbers and the potential exposure that new renters coming into the island bring. What we're trying to do is to put a cap, to try to, for a moment, take a breath with this situation. Let's not bring any higher numbers of people for the next 2 or 3 weeks while we can get a better idea of where is this whole thing going to go. Are we, 3 weeks, I think we'll be smarter about, are we at the beginning stages of this, and is this going to become even a more difficult issue, in which case I would suspect that at the end of 21 days you would probably see some sort of an extension on this, or are we going to see that in the next 3 weeks the landscape is looking very different, and at that point this moratorium could expire and we could begin moving back to business. But I think our concern and where the 21 days comes from is that things are changing so fast. The landscape is so unclear around where this virus is going, when it's going to hit, when it is going to hit us, and at what level and to what degree, that this is giving us a chance to sit back, get a little bit better sense of what's going on, but also give our residents a bit of a breather. There are a lot of residents that are very, very, very concerned about the impact that renters are bringing. Particularly in the last couple of days, I'm getting more and more emails on concerns around what's happening in some of the states where we potentially get a lot of our renters. Just this morning, I have a news release communication from New York, where New York is requiring certain people to just generally start doing 14-day quarantines. Other cities are starting to require people to quarantine. There's some question about whether some of the people, rather than being involved in the quarantines, are now trying to get out of the city and say, well, where can I go to get out of New York, which has or out of somewhere else? And I'm getting more and more communications from people who are concerned that if we don't do something here, we are going to be an attractive place for those people to come. So I think what we're trying to do is measured. It is not intended to shut down rentals. It is intended to put some stability in the situation for a while. Let us take a breath and let us get a better handle on the landscape in a couple weeks. I hope that explains enough of the detail of how this works. So with that, what I would like to do is to ask for a motion to consider approval of ordinance 2020-01 an emergency ordinance of the town of Kiawah Island of the Town Council of the town of Kiawah Island, South Carolina, to declare a state of emergency, temporarily suspend the normal operating procedures of council meetings, and take additional measures to protect the public. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Before I ask each of the council members to give you the opportunity to make some comments, Stephanie, I don't want to put you, or either Stephanie or Joe.
I'll let you.
There are, in addition to the rental provision of this, there are in fact about 11 other provisions in here. Do you think for the audit we need to summarize? I don't know whether, do people sitting out there watching have a copy
They have a
of this?
copy. Stephanie made it available through comment, but I will let Joe, as our town attorney, I'll let him summarize.
Sure.
Yeah, why don't you summarize the highlights, just so they understand some of the other things that are in here.
Well, and in fact, I'm going to back up just a smidgen. As this is an emergency ordinance, South Carolina has a state law that all municipalities are looking at right now for passage of emergency ordinances. The key factors at play here are that these ordinances only need one reading. They go into effect immediately. The caveat is that they can't last longer than 61 days, and they have to be passed with at least a 2/3 vote of council. And again, this is the statute that every municipality is using to deal with these issues. The ordinance that we're looking at today, I'm going to let you guys, I mean, you've covered the short-term rental stuff, but the rest of it is really procedural issues that allow the town to function in a virtual manner, largely. It's canceling regularly scheduled meetings for both council and any other committees. It's also the ordinance that has asked that the public not attend these meetings except by virtual means, and allowing the public to comment by virtual means. And then otherwise, authorizing the town administrator and the mayor to take whatever protective measures they deem are necessary for protection of the public. And then, of course, the short-term rental ordinance issue.
Okay. All right, well, I'm going to start with Mary Ann in just a second. I should read my notes before I, when I went through all of the 121 comments we got, I said most of them had to do with how does the policy work, which hopefully I've summarized. There were a couple other things real quickly that came through there that I also want to, before we get to the comments. There was a lot of question about, does this only deal with residents, or does this in fact have any impact on part-time owners or the part-time owners' families or guests? And the answer is this does not. This is not in any way, this deals only with people who are essentially what I call paying customers in a short-term rental. So this is not in any way restricting, for example, property owners who are part-time to coming back here and using their properties. In fact, all of the evidence that we have shows right now that the overwhelming majority of our short-term rental properties actually right now are being occupied by their owners or by families of their owners. So this is not impacting our residents, it's not impacting our part-time owners, it's not impacting anybody who is here as simply a guest of the owner. The question was also raised, what happens April 15th? I think I touched on that, and the answer is I don't know. As this is written, it would expire on April 15th, but of course, what we're trying to do is give us a couple weeks to better see how things are going to transpire. And so at that point, as I said, it could go away, it could be extended, or we might find we do different things. I can imagine, and I'm proposing that we might get comfortable with additional rentals, but be concerned about occupancy, and maybe for an interim measure do something that reduced the occupancies. I think anything's on the table, but at the moment, this would expire on the 15th. While it doesn't relate to, there's another question that was out there that I wanted to address, and is, do we have any cases on Kiowa? And I know that Stephanie Braswell in her communications has tried every day to communicate that, but people may have noticed a change in the way we have written about this in the last couple days. Up till the middle of last week, we had no cases, and we knew for a fact that we had no cases because the DHEC, who is doing all of the testing and getting the testing, DHEC was informing the counties, and they were identifying the municipalities that had cases, and then we were being informed of that. So up until the middle of last week, we had accurate information that there were no cases affected, no positive tests affecting Kiowa Island, because that data was being reported. At the end of last week, there was a change in policy, and so DHEC will no longer, they are telling the county if there is a case in their county, but they are not telling the county where those cases are. So they are no longer telling us if there is a Kiowa case. So we are still of the basis that we are not aware of any active case among a Kiowa resident or at all. The difference is we are no longer in a position to say that with any insurance. So when you see cases in Charleston, they may or may not be in Kiowa. We have no reason to think that there are any here, but we will not have that reporting. We're not pleased with that, and we have conversations underway with the county to see if we can get that changed. All right, I have a motion, a second. Mary Ann.
Thank you, Mayor. I would first say that a lot of thought and consideration went into this decision, but I can only say that as an individual, I have a personal responsibility to do everything I can to protect myself and my family from COVID-19. And as a council member, I have a responsibility to do everything I can to suppress the spread of COVID-19 and protect the Kiowa community. Therefore, I will be supporting this recommendation.
Thank you. Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Clearly in my lifetime, and I'm sure in most of the people who are listening to this meeting's lifetime, we have never been faced with anything like this. When events such as the Olympics in 2020 in Tokyo have been postponed for a year, when the Masters Golf Tournament, something we're all familiar with, has been postponed, this is not business as normal. So none of us can expect the town of Kiowa to be acting as normal. What we are trying to do is balance the need for public safety with the convenience and other issues that affect daily life. It is inconvenient for all of us. There's no question about it. As Mary Ann just said, some of it is personal responsibility. In other words, if you are one of the people who is likely to be severely affected by this, don't leave your home. Find ways for other things to be done, for people to help you, family members and others. For those of us who may not be seriously affected by it, we could be carriers of this, and because this disease doesn't show itself for a couple of weeks, it's an extra measure of responsibility we need to take on. The town has acted, in my opinion, very thoughtfully in trying to consider how to balance your rights and responsibilities with the public health. And this ordinance, while relatively simple in many ways, is very important. And I plan to vote in favor of this ordinance. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman White.
There is a wide variety of opinions about what we should do on Kiowa in response to the coronavirus. These range from doing nothing and keeping all efforts on a strictly voluntary basis to locking down the island to all visitors, including non-resident homeowners who are not currently here. 80% of our homeowners don't live here, but they are part of our community. I do not believe we should lock down the island or prohibit any of them from coming. Taking a 21-day pause seems a reasonable action to me. If conditions change during this period, then we can adjust accordingly. But I'd prefer not to default to the extreme position of closing the island, canceling existing reservations, or telling people who want to visit that they are not welcomed. I don't believe this position puts anyone at increased risk. Every one of us has the power to self-quarantine to avoid exposure to others if we are so inclined. For those people who have a serious medical condition, there are resources available to help. Dozens of our neighbors have volunteered to shop on others' behalf or to run errands. We have a remarkable community which stands ready to help anyone who needs it. I intend to support this ordinance because I think it is a reasonable and balanced response to the situation in which we find ourselves.
Klaus?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will support this. I don't think for once that I can actually add anything at all to what was eloquently said before. I echo those sentiments, and as I said, I plan to support this.
Well, that's disappointing on his face.
I know.
Don't get used to it. It won't happen very often.
I thought I had a couple minutes to do a couple other things. Thanks, Klaus. I'd like to just to Joe, our town attorney. I have gotten a couple questions, more than a couple, about the town's legal position and the validity of our taking this position. The nature of some of those questions range everything from the takings law, which we've heard about in many cases, and this constitute a takings to, but I think ultimately the question addressed is, can you clarify for the council an assurance that based on your legal opinion, we have the authority to take the action that we are proposing here?
Certainly, and again, this is a legal opinion I've offered up several times in the past 2 weeks, but given the nature of the threat to public health that's presented to us, it's a generational threat. The town is clearly within its rights to take this very measured approach under the general police powers that are granted to the town, under the Home Rule Act, under the governor's many directives that have been issued and authorizing municipalities to act to protect public health. I can't get too technical about this, obviously, but there's a line between police powers and a compensable taking, and we are very, very far away from that line. Police powers allows a fireman to come break down your door if your house is on fire. Police powers allow the police to follow a suspect into your home if that suspect presents a danger to safety and health. Police powers allow towns to pass ordinances that regulate the usage of your land. And police powers allow towns to act during a time of what can only be called a national emergency that threatens the health of all citizens. So I can say with full confidence that what the town is looking at today is entirely legal. Again, the city of Charleston has just ordered people to shelter in place. I mean, there are far, far more aggressive measures, and I'm not being critical, but there are more aggressive measures out there that are perfectly valid as well. So I can't emphasize enough. Everyone is going to suffer somewhat economically at this time, but that does not mean that the government is responsible for that economic pain.
Thank you.
Just before I bring this then to a vote, as I said, after we finish this vote, I've got a lot of questions on other kinds of issues, and as I said, I propose that we stay and continue after the vote and try to go through some of those questions. I did get a couple more questions though related to this particular thing. One was, if someone rents after the 15th of April and things get worse, and the town, and people, will the town extend will extended reservations be honored? I think the question is simply, okay, we've said right now that as part of this, you can continue to go out there and make reservations for rental occupancy after the 15th. What happens if we get close to the 15th and things are not looking very good, or they're looking worse? And I think that's why we've approached this, to say what we will be doing over the next 21 days is, again, assessing both whether this is a useful approach, and what impact it has on our residents in terms of increasing their comfort. But also we'll be looking at things, and the rental companies have been very, very helpful in sharing with us data about what they are experiencing right now, which is mostly they are seeing cancellations. They recognize, though, that if we get to later in April and things are worse rather than better, that it would be very likely that this would extend. And at that point, if in fact there were a lot of new renters on the books, we might have to address the question of honoring existing rentals differently. But I don't think we can even start to make that consideration until we get there, because it'll be weighed in the context of what the medical situation is. At this particular time, this council was able to get comfortable not to eliminate or not honor existing rentals, because we were comfortable the numbers were so low, and we were comfortable that over the coming weeks they're in a process of declining, not expanding. All right, with that, we have a motion and we have a second. I am going to, Petra, ask you to take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Conlon,
Aye.
Councilmember Prickett,
Aye.
Councilmember Said,
Aye.
Mayor Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Wada.
Aye.
All right, so the motion passes. And I want to, before we move on to these other questions, obviously thank the town council members for the amount of time that you have put into thinking about and engaging in this discussion, and it's only the tip of the iceberg of how many other issues that you've been involved in dealing with over the last week, so I appreciate that. We will, just from a communication standpoint, we will be doing 2 communications pretty quickly after this meeting. Dorota, you're shaking your head no?
Oh, no, sorry.
So what do I not know? We'll be doing 2 communications. Our communications specialist, Stephanie Braswell, who is the person producing all of the things that our residents get, will be providing a communication to the general public, to all of our residents, property owners, that will, again, provide some of the greater detail for them about the proposal so they understand how it works. We will also be doing a communication today directly to the owners of our 1,350 rental properties, and also to the major property management firms, so that they understand in detail what the requirements are and what they need to do in terms of, I mean, this is a quick turnaround here, because effectively this is now effective today, what they have to do in order to comply with this. And in most cases, my understanding is this is relatively simple. I have a rental property in North Carolina, and I know I can right now go to a website, and I can gray out every one of the dates I don't want somebody in. And my understanding is that's the case in almost every one of our property managers' systems, so that should be pretty easy. So we'll have those 2 communications go out. If I still have an audience, I hope I do after that, and I would ask, in this case, open this up also to all of the council members if they have any insight or additions on these. Am I still getting?
It came online.
The question says, if someone wants to extend an existing reservation, will they be allowed? My off-the-cuff reaction is probably, yeah, because what we're trying to do here is to put a halt or a curb to new risks coming into the community. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to keep someone who's coming from New York who's potentially been exposed, or somebody that we don't know their situation. If they're already here and they've been here for a week or so, I'm not sure that tossing them off the island is what we're trying to do, so that would be my reaction. Just some of the questions we've gotten. What I will tell you is that that when you look at the remaining major issues that we have, one of the key ones is Harris Teeter food delivery, the whole situation we have with the availability of food. And I think that's one of the areas that we internally have been spending a lot of time. I have to throw out all kinds of kudos to Harris Teeter, and especially their manager, Carl. In a different environment, I would tell you, go in there and shake his hand. Today, just go in and nod at him. But he has really gone to bat with his corporate entity to try to get some different provisions and operations here. We did get the senior hours approved Monday and Thursday. I understand it's early, 6 o'clock. I've even gotten some complaints about why is it at 6 o'clock in the morning. And the answer of that is because operationally, that is the only way you can do it. If you want to have that store emptied out, so only a certain group can be in it, you got to start with it empty. Operationally, there's just not a feasible way that at 2 in the afternoon, Carl can go through that store and tell everybody that's in it, some who've only been there 5 minutes, that they have to leave. So I think, it's, 6 o'clock's early, but I went to watch the first day, and the parking lot was almost half full before 5 o'clock, before 6 o'clock, and the parking lot was full by 20 minutes later. So it does seem to have served a purpose. The next one is tomorrow, so we'll see how that goes. One of the biggest issues at Harris Teeter is the ability or the inability to practice social distancing. Part of it is the nature of the store. It's like everything else at Fresh Fields. It's too small. And so, being able in those aisles to keep, your distance is concerning. I'm getting a lot of emails and letters from people about, I'm just not comfortable at Harris Teeter. What else can you do? We have, and they have asked if families would only bring one person into the store. I'm seeing some of that, but also you can go in the store still and see, and I think that is one of the concerns, in fact, with the rentals, was by eliminating and keeping down the numbers of short-term rentals, we are eliminating some of the traffic up there, particularly on show-up days and so on. We're going to continue to talk to Harris Teeter about other things. There is a great desire for more options around grocery delivery, or having options where people could order groceries and then do pickup like you can at the Harris Teeter over on Maybank. But honestly, I don't think that this store right now is staffed or has the facilities to do that. But, we're treating everything as why not? Let's see if we can figure out how to make it work. So we're continuing to work with Harris Teeter. Keep sending your ideas to us, and we take our ideas back up to them. And I really also need people to again, really be more cognizant of their conduct in that store, because those employees are at a lot of risk. And in that store, it's not just our residents. We are also having I'm not ready to announce anything, but we are having a conversation with Vincent's Drugs. We know that at some point we are going to have residents who are again in this vulnerable category, have medical issues, need drugs, prescriptions delivered, who are uncomfortable or are going to be uncomfortable going out because they are in a situation where maybe they've been told to quarantine. So we are working on, not ready to commit to it, an approach where we will 2 or 3 days a week, if a person is quarantined or otherwise needs for valid medical reasons not to be out and about, then we will work out some arrangement where they can have their prescriptions separated, and 2 or 3 times a week, either a member of the town staff, one of our code compliance officers, for example, or more likely, we are working with the town's CERT committee, that we will do some arrangement where a CERT team member will pick up those prescriptions. They will take them to the residences. They have to be able to visibly hand them off, so they'll take them up to a porch. When the person comes to the door, they can leave it. We're not ready to put that in place, but I think if this gets to be a bigger concern, we will be able to do that. I've got a number of questions about the how many people can aggregate, and what are we doing, and what instructions do the people on the beach patrol have? There was a lot of confusion earlier this week about the number, what the guidelines are around the number of people who can aggregate in groups. The president sometime back put in place a 50-person requirement that was reduced later to a 10-person requirement, and that was then adopted by the state and by Governor McMaster in his comments as a guideline. Some municipalities have in turn turned that guideline into an actual regulation through an ordinance action. We are still continuing it as a guideline, but having said that, that doesn't lessen the degree to which we are trying to enforce it. It is the 10 then that I think, if people are saying, how big a group should I be in? 10, not 3, 10 is the sort of operable number out there. On the beach, what we have been asking our beach patrol to do is use discretion. We're not out there counting heads and going, oh my gosh, this group's got 9, you're okay, and this group's got 11, let's go break them up. I have some letters from residents who would like us to do that, but I think at this point we're still trying to judge the situation, whether people are causing a problem or not. So the beach patrol is instructed in their judgment, if there is a group that is larger than the guidance, they will use the judgment and whether they ask that group to disperse. And I think to a large extent it depends on what they're doing, how busy the beach is, how close they are to other people. But they are ready to enforce the 10. We're not going to look the other way. We will enforce the 10 if in fact the circumstances warrant it. The confusion arose from the press conference with McMaster the other day. He separately, last week, put in place an additional provision which was intended primarily for use by law enforcement. In that provision, what he was saying is that for law enforcement officers, either the state SLED officers or our deputies here on the island, that if they encountered a group of 3 or more people, and they judged that that group of 3 or more people constituted a public safety hazard, either by their behavior, what they were doing, the conduct that they were engaging in, he was giving the law enforcement officers the latitude to go in and disperse and take action against that group. So we're not telling people you can't be in groups of 10. We're not telling you have to be down to 3. What we are saying is, if you are in a group of 3 and you're causing problems, the law enforcement officers have now a different ability to come in and deal with that. I mean, there's been a lot of confusion about that. I hope it helps. I did get a number of questions about, well, this action we took today related to short-term rentals. What about the hotel? I think it's everybody, the Sanctuary Hotel, I think as everybody knows, and I credit Roger and Bill Goodwin with this. They voluntarily shut the sanctuary to reservations on their own, effective through April 6th. We did not deal with that in this issue, again, because things are so fluid. We've got a couple weeks to see where we are on April 6th. So what I imagine is that over the next week, we will probably sit down with with the resort and get a better understanding of what their intentions might be. I have no sense at all at this point, based upon what they're seeing, whether they are intending to probably extend that date or not. I have no idea. But at that point, we'll make a separate decision on whether there is some action that is warranted with regard to hotels. Got a question, is it the rental company's discretion to refund deposits? I know that, and this is one of the reasons we did not take the view of requiring the cancellation of existing rentals, is that we know with 1,350 rental properties that rent through so many different forums. I mean, we know that we have the resorts and Pam Harrington and Steve Ellis and Vacasa and a few big ones, but we have hundreds of rooms that are out on VBRO and they're out on Airbnb and others, and all with different cancellation policies. And one of our desire was to not get into the problem of people having all kinds of problems, and do they get their money back, do they not get their money back? And frankly, I didn't want people who are here to walk away with a bad feeling and a bad sense about Kiawah Island, such that they did not want to come back a year from now because somehow they felt they got screwed in the whole process of so it is, the rental companies have their own policies. We have not, by this action, done anything to intercede in what their policies are. I do know in informal conversations that some of the larger rental companies have been making some changes to be more lenient about their refund policies and are operating in that way. But we have not taken a position to get involved in that. Let's see what I have here. Can Freshfields eliminate crowds by increasing their home deliveries and implementing crowd controls such as staggered shopping days for families? Again, I think, I hope all that I've reflected here is that we do realize that Freshfields is a pinch point in our desire to keep people separated, and we're going to continue to talk to them about all kinds of things. But then again, we have to be realistic about what they are able to do. I think that I have addressed most of. There has been a question about whether there is additional some concern about people swimming on the beach, and whether there's additional exposure. The guidance that we have, we are in conference calls about every other day with the chief medical persons with South Carolina DHEC, and on some number of those calls we have the medical representatives from MUSC. That question was asked early on, whether there was any special dangers either of a person who might be contaminated swimming in the ocean or swimming in a public pool. The answer at that time is there was not. Not when they're in the water. The water was not the issue. That again, if they're out of the water, you have all of the issues of, you know, if they're on beach chairs and whatever, that those issues are still there. But there is no evidence. Excuse me. There is no evidence that the virus is passed through water. And so at this point, we've been told that those operations are safe, that there is no reason that we should be banning swimming in the ocean. But we continue to ask this about every week. We ask the question again because maybe something new has been learned. Another question that I have gotten just today, so I'll only say we've got the question. I haven't the foggiest idea on the answer, but I alluded to it earlier. Is what happens if in fact we have people coming to Kiawah, potentially family members, who are coming from locations who have now put in place specific quarantine requirements? And the concern that has been expressed to me is, well, okay, a person's living in New York City, they've been told to quarantine for 14 days, so they get in their car and say, I don't want to do that, I'm going to come down to Kiowa instead. Are we then going to, how do we know that they are coming from New York? And if they were required to quarantine for 14 days in New York, should we be in fact putting some additional, requirement like that? I've also gotten questions, some communities, Hawaii, for example, has said, if you're coming to Hawaii, you're gonna quarantine for 14 days before you can do anything in Hawaii. I've gotten more and more questions to say, well, should we be requiring people to quarantine if they come here from a high-risk area? I don't have an answer to that. Those questions have really, that really come about in the last 48 hours. I think those are the kinds of questions we will now, in our next calls with with DHEC and the medical people, we'll start to have some of those questions, make sure we understand the medical impact. But at the moment, we've not even discussed, we have no plans, we have no intent at this moment to put in place any kind of additional quarantine or identification of people. And the hope is that, obviously, one of the outgrowths of putting the moratorium on rentals is that we're gonna have fewer of those people coming in. I think that with as many questions as we got, I think that gets the major themes of what we have heard. I would ask the other council members, have you, anything that you're hearing from your colleagues on the island, your social circle, your people you're running into that you think need to be addressed, or that you're hearing and want to make sure people are hearing?
If I may, I looked through all these questions, and I saw one that for one bothered me, but I think that's also worth addressing in a larger sense for a couple of minutes. It's the question that related to how can the mayor suggest in his communication that we as landlords are responsible for the renters. That's what the property manager is there for. So I have a couple of points here. One is that's obviously wrong, it's wrong as a matter of law, and you are responsible for it, and we hope it never comes to that, but the town will hold landlords responsible for it, as it should. But I think there's a bigger issue here. I feel very strongly that the first line of defense in these unprecedented times is we all, our own responsibility, each person, hygiene, social distancing. My daughter came from New York 4 weeks ago. If she came today, I promise you, she would be in the house for 2 weeks and she would go nowhere, right? It is our own responsibility. Most of us, thankfully, on the island are able to exercise a lot of that. We have to deal with a more vulnerable group that really does need help. But let's not jump to the town has to do, Kika has to do. Let's start with ourselves. Next step is our neighbors. And I think a really important part of that is do not abrogate your responsibility for that. Do not say things like, I'm renting out my place, not my problem, I got a property manager. That is completely the wrong attitude in a time like this, and that will not make things better, that'll make things worse.
Chris, do you have any other comments? Dan, any other comments? Marianne? Any other comments?
I'd just like to say that at times like this, people are in a confined space. They're told what they have to do, what they can't do. And it's a time when tempers will flare. People will get very anxious about different things. We do have the Coastal Crisis Chaplaincy available, and we do have a phone number to call if people feel like they're at their wits' ends and can't handle anything. That number is 843-724-1212. They're used to handling emergencies. They handle all of our first responders. Thank you.
All right, before I adjourn, just two other things I'd like to comment on. you know, in addition to the, trying to deal with the current situation that we are in, one of the things that we need to start thinking about is this is going to be over, and at some point. And we all know that that this town's is taking a huge is in the process of taking a significant economic hit. Right now, it's bad, but it's manageable based on the discussions we have with all of the various commercial interests and community associations and so on. But if this continues for any significant length of time, the impact becomes very difficult. When you think about the number of employees that are being impacted, to their benefit, I think I said that both the club and the resort, and I know some retailers at Freshfields are doing everything they can right now to retain their employees, keep them going, keep them in jobs, try to extend their paychecks as long as they can. But if they get to a point where they can't do that anymore and they lose those employees, one of the big challenges later on is going to be we're now an island up and running and ready to get the economy going, and where are all the people? So one of the things that I'm in Councilman Wydick and I had a conversation yesterday with a couple of the other commercial business leaders on the island, and I think one of the things that we think is important is that we start looking forward to what is the economic impact and what are some of the things that we are going to need and want to do soon to be able to jumpstart the economy once this goes by. Now, obviously, entities like the resort and the partners and so on are the key players in doing that. But I think both the community association and the town need to be engaged in them in understanding ways that we may be able to help jumpstart this economy once it's going. Whether that be doing things to put more focus in advertisements in the tourism world to help people quickly understand once we're past this that Kiowa's back up and open for business, things to help bring employees back to the island. So probably in the next week or so, I hope that we can put forth some ideas to maybe get the town with the community association and some of our business leaders starting to do some actual concrete work and thinking about what some of the issues are and how we can help jumpstart this island and our rentals, our resort business, our restaurants, our commercial businesses to get them going. The last thing I want to just raise is I would be more than happy on some sort of regular basis if there's an interest in doing some sort of a regular call-in with the community. In this case, it's not a call-in because we're speaking and we don't have the ability to listen and answer questions. But if there is any appetite at all for that, if you would let Stephanie Braswell or Stephanie Tillerson know, I would be more than happy every few days or at whatever frequency made sense to do some sort of a public call-in where I'll come in here. And if any council member wants to join me, that'd be great. And we'll take your questions for an hour or 45 minutes or whatever and try to answer them best we can. Sometimes that's a lot faster and easier than writing long communications, of which mine are usually a little way too long. So if you have an interest in that, then let somebody know. Any other? Okay.
No, Mayor.
With nothing else, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.